Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about chapter 3, the marketing research process. First of all, let's look at our learning objectives. The first learning objective is analyzing problem definitions process. Number 2, understand the steps in the market research process. So this is the big diagram that illustrates the whole research process. It has 8 different steps, and it's kind of difficult to remember all of them. If you ask me to write down just without looking at the slide, I would be having some difficulty. So that's why I want to make sure that you understand each different step, one after another. So we'll look at the from step by step and then look at the holistically the whole research process. You start with step number 1, identification of the problem and a statement of the research objectives. Although this is only one of the steps, but I think this is probably the most important step in the whole process. We'll talk about that in a little later. Number 2, we talk about the creation of the research design. So once you figure out what you want out of the research project, and then you need to figure out a plan, right? So this is basically the research design, the research plan. How would you go about doing it? Number 3 is we're going to choose research method. I mean, there are all kinds of research methods available for you to choose from. So we need to figure out which one we want. And then we move on to choose a sampling method or sampling procedure, or different sampling procedures available for us to choose. And then number 5, we're going to begin the gather data or data collection process. After that, we'll have analysis of data, and then we do a report in writing, and as well as in most cases, we need to present to our client or sometimes to our management. And after research project done, we need to have some follow-up to pave the ground for the next stage of research. Okay, let's look at the problem definition stage. It is kind of long, as you can look at it. Step number 1 all the way down to number 8. So we have like 8 different steps within the step number 1 of the market research process. The first step of the the first step of the problem definition process is to recognize the problem or opportunity. Now, problem, opportunities, they are intertwined, and sometimes you identify a problem and then you find an opportunity. So really, we're trying to see what we can uh, do with the problems, because if you solve the problem, it became opportunity to improve your, for example, customer service, and then you improve your customer satisfaction, and then you're going to help improve your sales and customer retention, and also customer acquisition. Step number 2 is that to find out why the information is being sought. So before you conduct your research, you find out what is the problem. I mean, we need to understand any other suspected motive, like why are we doing this research? Why are we gathering this information? I mean, this is something that to see if there's a legitimate reason to gather information to solve a particular problem. And obviously, number 3, we need to understand the decision-making environment. We need to examine the cultural bureaucracy issues within the company and try to get a better understanding of what kind of culture this company has, what kind of decision-making process is involved, and is it more like a democratic process, or is it just more like a authoritarian decision-making environment? So we need to get a sense of what research findings would be used for in which kind of decision-making environment. And then we move on to find out, usually when you look at the particular brand or company, what you see are some of the symptoms. And for example, most likely companies sales going down and the traffic is slowing down, and those are the symptoms. Okay, they're not a real root problem. They just like, for example, it's like a patient, you have fever, but the fever is not the problem. I mean, fever is a symptom. There's something going on with the body. So we need to identify the underlying causes of the symptoms rather than to dwell on symptoms themselves. This is very important. Again, I think this is kind of analogy I want you to think about. The communication specialists, which is your goal to become, like say, we're like the doctors of communications. We're trying to solve the communication problems of a company. So we become like involved in finding out what's going on. And then we have some tools to help us separate symptoms from the root causes. Now, symptoms, if you dwell on the symptom issue, like almost like we talk about iceberg principle. Iceberg principle basically talks about that, what you see is just the tip of iceberg. We need to go way deep down to look at the real root issues involved. And then number 5, we need to find out, once you communicate to your management about they want to solve the problem. Obviously, let's say reverse the sales decline trend. How do we get more sales? How do we get more customers? So this is a management problem. And how do we do that? So we need to translate the management problem into marketing research problem so that it's more operational for us to help management solve that problem. So really, we need to get a better sense of what is the management problem is about. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious. So we need to find out that so that we do this translation process, because we know how to solve the market research problem, but we need to translate the management problem into market research problem, which I'm going to use an example to illustrate the process. This is the most difficult step to understand, also most difficult step to grasp, And then step number 6, determine whether information already exists. So basically, what it means that, if you encounter like a management problem and like a sales decline for retailer, and then, most likely you're not the only retailers who is encountering this problem. There might be some other research has already been done, maybe have similar situation or very similar cases, which you probably can learn something from rather than conduct your research yourself. So really, basically, the question is that, have you researched other research? It's kind of obvious, but we need to make sure that we're not doing repetitive work. Okay. And then number 7 is determine whether the question can be answered. Are the objectives clear and realistic? Meaning that, so once you decide like, okay, we want to research, we want to figure out why sales going down. Now, is this question going to be able to find a solution? And then, so we need to ask those to see if objective clear, realistic. Like we reverse sales trend, and maybe we can say, well, next year is it possible to stop, we call it bleeding of the sales, because so this is really important for us to understand. Obviously, the last step of the problem definition process is try to state clearly the research objectives, including a timetable and responsible party, meaning that who is going to do what. Okay, so this is a very important research objective. So, research objective, for example, could be, for example, let's say, to determine how our customers think about us It's like so. It's like image. What kind of image our customers have of us? So this is one of the. Or number two is that uh, to determine if our pricing is too high or too low. So that's another possible research objective. Now let's move on to uh, the some of steps that involved in the problem definition stage that we use to help us to really define the research the problems for our analysis. So we have lots of exploratory studies that help us to understand the nature of the problem and identify the problem, and then sometimes try to be able to identify important variables to be studied. For example, the sales going down. The sales is a dependent variable, and then we want to identify some of the independent variable. Could it be customer satisfaction, or could it be pricing issue, or could it be communication issue like a message issue? All the time could it be distribution channel issues, or or in broad sense that could be due to the big macro environment that is not uh, doing well. In other words, for example, right now it's in the downturn of the economy, so it's very difficult to boost your sales. So exploratory research studies really most likely we use a small sample size, and then normally we don't quantify the research data. Because small sample size doesn't make sense for us to, like, for example, if we interview 5 people and 5 people in a, let's say, in a focus group, and it's meaningless to calculate the percentage, like 20% of people of the five, that's only 20 out of five is only one. That doesn't make much sense, from a broad uh, sense to the general population from which the sample is drawn. So really, we look at the uh, variety of exploratory studies, and the textbook give you a very detailed definition. I'm going to go over real fast. A pilot study, for example, is like use a very small sample size, try to see how it looks. Pilot basically means like it's like a preliminary stages of the research. Focus group typically involve like 8 to 12 people, and 12 is too many in my opinion. It's like usually like 8 people, probably good number. Sometimes 10 people, and try to do a group kind of interview, like moderated by a moderator, and then to really have a group discussion on the key issues facing the brand. And could it be the brand image? Could it be brand awareness? Or could it be the brand pricing and distribution? Or could it be just any issue tied to do with like a brand itself, like say its features? Okay, so that's something we can take a look at it, folks, in the focus group. Case analysis, that's also us, like look at the similar companies situation. Like for example, lots of retailers have gone bankrupt, and then you can study, for example, the Borders, the bookstore, to see what's going to happen to the Barnes and Noble, the brick and mortar like bookstores. Do they have a chance to survive? So you can take a look at it. Secondary data basically means that the data which have been already gathered by previous researchers. So secondary data reside on the internet, reside on databases, reside inside your company's archives, databases. Concept testing is something that we concept testing many times. Actually, for example, in advertising business, we want to test a concept of advertising campaign. So we need to use small group of people and then try to get their responses, to see whether they like the TV commercial. And then, for example, there's a one just study on the V8. V8 just this is like a like it's a juice company. V8 is actually one of the brands of the Campbell soup. So, okay, there's a talk about a V8. Actually, let me just go to the website. Maybe we can looking at the Direct Marketing Foundation. Direct Marketing Foundation. Oh, Advertising Foundation. Advertising Education Foundation. Okay. So Advertising Education Foundation, let me see. Okay, where's that? Okay, Advertising Education Foundation. Advertising Education Foundation. Let's see. Anyway, actually, uh, okay. So actually, I just find this website. It actually they changed the location. It took me a while to find out where it is. It's about a V8. If you go to the Advertising Educational Foundation, I highly recommend, especially for our advertising majors, take good advantage of this website. There are tons of resources available for you to just learn much about advertising. So this is actually when I'm talking about V8, it's a soup. So you can take a look at one of the examples here, which talks about how advertising research helps solving the problem.
Sales had softened. And the reason for that is not because users didn't like the product, it's just that they had to be reminded to use it. And we needed a campaign that could provide continuity and excitement and recall to get people to go and pick it up more.
We talked to VA users and really got into their heads. We had them go back even to their childhood memories to understand exactly what they were thinking and what their first experiences were with VA.
Sitting at the kitchen table and eating breakfast, and my family's there, my mom and dad and my brother and I. And my mom has made breakfast.
We actually did some innovative research techniques to have people describe their thoughts and feelings about the brand, and every piece of research was consistent. V8 was just thought of as something that was not for me and not for today and stuck in the past somewhere.
So regarding V8, what do you really want?
A tasty product that's good for me.
What do you want that for?
One technique is that we ask people the same question over and over and over again, and we say, what do you want? What do you really want? What do you want that for? And they start to talk about it, and they kind of get intimate with what's going on. What we're doing with that technique is unpeeling the onion. If you want to think of a...
We don't have enough time to talk, to really play, continue to play the TV, video, because for those of you who are interested, you just keep going to just uh, look at it, and then so we do test the concept, try to use research, try to see what kind of campaign idea we might be able to get out of the research. Now, next one is kind of like a depth interview. Some people should say in-depth interview. What it is that it is called a one-on-one interview. Basically, you interview people one at a time instead of like just in a group setting. So that's in-depth depth interviews. That depth interview helps us to get a really deep into consumer minds, and you can just ask any questions and then dig deeper into their underlying motivation for what they do, and why they do it. And also we do sometimes like a taste tests, and especially food products, food drinks. I mean, we do a lot of them, just small groups also. And then the last one called experience surveys. Experience surveys like it's really basically talk about serving a small group of experienced professionals, usually managers, executives. So that's experience survey. So this is something that we do. Okay, exploratory studies. I mean, remember, exploratory studies are really to really preliminary research. Really try to enhance our understanding of a concept, clarify the nature of the problem. So this is a really small, usually involves small group example. So, and then we look at the step number two. Basically, figured out what's the plan we have in terms of just solve the problem, or sometimes could be test a hypothesis coming out of the problem definition stage. For example, if we figured out hypothesizing that the customer satisfaction, there's a positive relationship between customer satisfaction and sales, okay? And we can just test it to see if it's true. Now, then obviously, the research objectives drive the process of research design. I mean, what kind of research objective uh, determines what kind of research design or research plan we might be having. So we have a broad uh, kind of categories of research design, uh, three big categories. If you remember that the previous slide, we talked about exploratory research, which is preliminary research, the first category. The second category called descriptive studies. Descriptive studies is really involves describe uh, what's the problems. For example, we want to describe, profile our customers, okay? And then we need to conduct usually a large sample size of our current customers to portray our customers in terms of the demographics, psychographics, geographics, lifestyle, product usages, and also the consumption patterns, decision making. So we need to do a pretty extensive research study to gather those information, describe who they are, what they do, what they like, what they don't like. And then the third big category called causal. Now, it's actually, I just find out that it's a causal studies. It's not a casual. Okay, so it's a causal means that cause and effect. Now, I'm sorry for this. Actually, the slide I didn't catch that mistake. It should be causal. Now, even the instructors, the sometimes forget, misspell this word. So it's a causal studies, which is try to find out the experiment, not experiment, to find out the cause effect. So typically we use experiments, which we'll talk about a little later. So basically, in the whole process of design, meaning that we need to think about the planning process, implementing process, controlling process, so that we make sure that everything's being taken care of before we actually begin to do study. And then stage number three, it's called choice of research method. Now, choice research methods, we have to decide what type of concrete research method we're going to use. Well, first of all, we will decide whether we want to do primary research or secondary research. Now, if our goal is just to conduct our secondary data research and then we don't do, either because we don't have money or because we don't have time, so we just do the secondary data research. Most cases will do both secondary data research and primary data research. And the primary data research, we have a couple of methods to use. Survey, for example, especially internet survey, online survey is very popular now. Or we can use focus groups, we use experiments, we use observational research, and all different methods, which will be able to determine which one is most appropriate for our particular situation. After we decided the research method, then we move on to sampling. Okay, sampling basically try to figure out what type of sampling method we might be using, probability versus non-probability, how big the sample size would be. So those are the things we need to decide. Okay, so as you can see, the sampling method, and then obviously we move on to data collection. Once we figure out a sample of people we want to communicate with, and we also want to gather data from. I mean, usually we have some channel of communication, like for example, it could be have the physical address, or it could be telephone number, cell number, email, or or sometimes even mobile phone. So those are the data collection process. We're going to talk more about it. And after that, you get your data, obviously, and then you begin to analyze your data uh, based, really looking at your research objective, what you originally hope to accomplish. So those are the things we do in the data analysis. By the way, this is probably the most important part because you need to make sure that you accomplish your research objectives. Now, after you analyze the data and then write your just interpret your results, and then you need to present your research report in both form. It could be in written form or in oral form. And then step number 8, last step, that follow up. It's not the end of, research is continuous process. It never ends. As long as the brand is in existence, you need to continue to conduct research. So this is like a step 1 to step 8. So this is, as you can see, we start with problem definitions and a research objective, and then move on to research design, and then you choose a research method, and then you choose sampling method, and then you begin to gather data, and then do data analysis. Finally, you do the reports, both in oral and written. Obviously, you need to do follow-up after that. So those are the pretty much the steps involved in the market research process. Now, obviously, I think I mentioned earlier that the problem definition stage, one of the steps actually is it's called a translating managed problem into market research problem, and then translating market research problem into market research objective. So this 3 steps tend to be very, very confusing. They're difficult to take a grasping of because it's complicated. And then I want to use this concrete example to help you understand the translation process so that you can see how do you get from something abstract into more concrete so that we can come up with some research objectives. And the problem actually is Starbucks coffee. This is actually the real case. Back in the last financial meltdown, 2008. So the Starbucks coffee or Starbucks company is known for its non-advertising. They don't spend lots of money on advertising before they become a global brand. I mean, their model is very simple. They use their store as like a word of mouth kind of locally driven, not advertising, just event sponsorships kind of stuff to generate word of mouth, public relations, try to get the people try their Starbucks coffee and then build the brand, which is a very, very interesting case in and of itself. So now with the financial meltdown and then they need to beef up their brand image. Starbucks not cheap, maybe it's like it could be expensive coffee, but so they need to do some research to conduct the advertising campaign. So one of the things that they were trying to find out is, does Starbucks out-of-home media reach and affect people as efficiently as its investment in television, radio, and print advertising? So they know that print advertising, television advertising, radio advertising work because they help drive the brand image. I mean, but they probably not so sure about out-of-home media, like say transit advertising, the bus advertising, the billboard, those kind of advertising formats. They want to find out if they're as efficient, in terms of generating their sales, boosting your brand image. So those are the kind of management problem. Okay. Now, how do you translate that management problem into research problem? Now, basically, we need to, using research terminologies, try to make it more what we call operational, more concrete. So here's what we come up with. How to gather information to determine recall. you look at the word recall, which is a very, very special word in advertising business, and the impact of out-of-home media. So basically, we want to determine the impact, like a research problem translate into determine recall and the impact out of home media. So it's related to recall. Now, why recall is important? Because if you remember if you see a billboard, you remember Starbucks coffee, especially like say iced coffee in this case. I mean, so you kind of try to figure out, people just drive on the highway. It's warm, hot summer, and then you look at the Starbucks like billboard, and then it prompts you to maybe take exit and then get a Starbucks coffee or a drink, you know. So that's why they kind of becoming a research problem, determine recall. Okay, now research problem it also need to be translated into research objective to be even more specific, more concrete. So that's see that's if you look at the sentence here, to measure recall and then purchase of specific products featured in the promotions via billboards, kiosk ads, and vehicle ads. Now, actually, gets much more concrete because not only we're going to measure recall, but also we're measuring when people remember your brand, when you're prompted by those out-of-home media ads, do they actually stop to purchase at a particular location? And then obviously the Starbucks coffee employees would ask you, how do you know about our promotion? I mean, if you can correlate that the exposure of the ad with the purchase of the specific products featured in the promotion, then you know it works, right? You see the ad, you want to buy. So this is what it's making much more uh, concrete, specific for you to measure impact out of home media. So this is a kind of example of translating management problem into research problems and then further into research objectives. So we already talked about the creation of research design. We basically talked about the descriptive studies already and causal studies, and then research method already we talked about that as well. Sampling, we talk about the probability, non-probability sample size. It's like we have one particular chapter. I'm not going to spend lots of time here. It's just an introduction of this research steps. Data gathering, really, we're going to talk about more about that. Okay, analyzing, writing report, and then follow up. Okay, so some of the questions, discussion question I want you to think about, critique the following methodology and then suggest more appropriate alternatives. So let's see, supermarket is interested in determining this image, cashier drop a short questionnaire into the grocer's bag of each customer prior to bagging the groceries. So I want you to look at each one of them and then to see what kind of answer you come up with, okay? So we are almost, and I hope that you guys can just answer those questions yourself, and in a real-time setting. Typically, we would get responses from a couple of students, but those are the pretty straightforward questions. I'm sure that you can get a pretty good answer out of it. So just if you have any question, email me, let me know. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.